State Senator Barry Loudermilk, and State Representative Christian Coomer. And it's great to have these folks here tonight to talk about the issue of school choice, because we want to really hit it from 30,000 feet, though we may delve into a little bit of kind of giving you an update on some legislation that is going on right now during the General Assembly session this year on the issue of school choice. And one of the things that's been kind of interesting is just how much support has happened just in the last couple of months, how many folks have come out in support of more school choice. January 25th was National School Choice Week, and we had nearly 3,000 students, I think, from private schools and charter schools mostly, from all over the state, that came up to, and homeschool students and whatnot, that came up in support of school choice. We called it the Harry Potter Initiative because all of them were wearing the little yellow scarves that you can pick up on your way out. We had about 3,000 little Harry Potters without the brooms running around the Capitol building. It was a bit of a frenzy that day. But I want to go ahead and jump right into it, and I'll throw a couple of questions out here, and then just raise your hand. Actually, let's just go here first. Anybody got a question on the top of their mind for any one of the three folks on the panel, just from what you may have seen in the film tonight? Okay, in the back, sir. And your name?
Thanks, Paula.
Okay.
First question that comes to mind with school choice is logistics. How are we going to handle transportation issues that is going to bring up? And are there any thoughts on that?
How do we handle the logistical challenges, transportation challenges with school choice and charters popping up?
That was a question that came to my mind as well. And what we're finding is that the parents are pretty smart and they're able to work that out. Maybe they can't drive their kids to school every day, but they can set up carpools and that kind of thing with others who can. If they do the online school at home, it's not a problem. Of course, you have a logistic of having to have the right internet speed to do that, but that's pretty much working itself out throughout Georgia as well. But as far as the county or the state, neither one would provide transportation. That would be something that the parents would be responsible for one way or another. But in other places where school choice exists, it hasn't really been an issue. Parents are willing to step up and do that because if that school that their child is in is not working for their child, they're willing to take them to a school that will work for their child. But it's a great question.
We couldn't include it in the film just for the sake of time, but Nina, is it Gilbert at Ivy Prep or Reuben? Gilbert, okay. So two Ninas I'm dealing with these days. Nina Gilbert, who's the principal of Ivy Prep, actually mentioned that in her interview, that there are actually students driving from as far as 2 counties over, parents driving their kids to get them to Ivy Prep, some driving as far as an hour and 15 minutes one way to get their kids to the school there. Because it was meeting such a need and they saw the benefit of it, and obviously the success ratios we've seen at Ivy Prep, you can understand why. Other questions? Kind of on your mind about how this affects the state. I want to throw this one out there because last year, for those of you who are following it, reading the AJC, reading the newspaper, reading the local paper, covered it as well. When the state Supreme Court handed down the decision that the Charter School Commission they were talking about in the movie, that the state legislature had set up, was in fact unconstitutional. And Senator Loudermilk or Representative Coomer, you guys might be able to explain this a little bit more. From the perspective of the court, what was that argument? Why did they arrive at that argument? And some of the arguments in contrast to that, what were some of those things? Because what they were essentially saying was that the Charter School Commission that the legislature put in place was unconstitutional according to the Georgia Constitution. The state did not have authority to set up that type of thing.
Well, I would point out first, just on the last comment you made, that the state doesn't have authority. And I think what you're drawing distinction from is the state level agency versus a local school board. But where some of you probably know about House Bill or House Resolution 1162, which has come through the House once for a vote, is going to come through again probably tomorrow or the next day. But in House Resolution 1162, we're essentially trying to override the Supreme Court decision last year that said that the state did not have the authority to interfere in local education issues. And for me personally, the issue that we're trying to fix in 1162 is not so much specifically relates to charter schools, but more importantly, there's a balance of powers issue, and you're all familiar with the balance of powers. We have 3 branches of government. They all have to have checks and balances on one another. And we often criticize our federal representatives because they have given so much authority to the executive branch by inaction in our federal legislature and Congress. To me, it seemed hypocritical to allow our judiciary in Georgia to reach so far out of its bounds, out of its constitutional authority, and essentially tell the legislature and the executive, you don't have authority to do what the people of Georgia want you to do. And so for me, there's while we can talk about the specifics of charter schools at issue, that particular bill to me was really about keeping an activist judiciary in its box and not letting them overrun the bounds of their authority.
Okay, and I want to throw this one out kind of as a follow-up. One of the things that the papers were saying last year when the Supreme Court made this decision was that, and you may have heard this argument, that this was a win for local control. That this actually, if you believe in local control, if you believe in decisions being made by government at the local level, this would have benefited you more because now the state's out of it, the state's not involved anymore. Now it's the exclusive authority of local school boards to determine how schools should be administrated, how schools should be governed. Can you speak to that issue, either of you, or Virginia as well, jumping at the bit, I guess, going to compare there. That issue, because that argument kind of turns the reality on its head, does it not?
It totally turns it on its head, because a charter school doesn't go into a community where the parents have not asked for it. If the parents want a charter school, then they ought to have the right to get it, and their children have a right to get an education that works for them. As far as local control, what is more local? A school board or a parent? The parent is the most local control there is. And so we're trying to empower the parents to make the decisions regarding their child's education.
This is, Senator Louder, I'm kind of throwing this up for you as a sophomore, as a homeschool father. I know that you'll have an interesting perspective on this. A lot of folks say this is taxation without representation. If all the decisions are made on behalf of the district by the state, then we're paying tax dollars ultimately, and we don't have any say in how those dollars are spent. What can you speak? How can you speak to that and kind of address that issue of we're paying for the schools and we don't have any control over it?
Well, I think this one's dead. Okay, we'll try this. The taxation without representation issue is something that even homeschool parents have been speaking about for many years. Not so loudly because they appreciate the freedom that they have to choose the education that they provide for the children. The analogy I use, the way our public education system in the United States of America, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush because there are elements, especially in the state of Georgia, the public schools, certain schools are performing really well. But imagine if you had the flu and you wanted to go to the doctor, but the only doctor you were allowed to go to was the one that was assigned to you based on the zip code of where you lived. But that doctor that you had gone to time and time again, every time you go, he never cures your flu. So you decide you're going to go to another doctor. Well, when you go to that other doctor, you still have to pay the first doctor that the state said that you had to go to. You had to
Sounds
spend
like Obamacare.
and it really does. Several years ago, I went to the nation of Ukraine, and I learned a lot about the communist government of the Soviet Union. That is the communist mentality. That is the society of communism, is the government basically tells you where you're going to go, even as far as where you bought your groceries based on where you lived and what groceries you were allowed to buy.